I am Melissa Poignon, the director of the Pinkerton Fellowship Initiative, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you this morning to John Jay College of Criminal Justice. This is our third year hosting a series of symposia that focus on youth justice. We host 2 symposia per year, and this is our 6th one. They have all been generously supported by the initiative as a collaboration with youth justice agencies that host John Jay students both at the undergraduate and graduate levels. They place them at direct service roles as an opportunity for their own development and their contribution. The overarching theme of this year's symposia is the art and science of positive youth development. Last month, we convened in this room and we asked ourselves, in what ways do the concepts and values of science affect day-to-day practices in youth justice? Today, the Youth Development Institute, or YDI, will engage us in ways to think about how we can integrate positive youth development into programs that serve court-involved youth. YDI has worked with a wide range of organizations, including government agencies, policymakers, community organizations, schools, and universities to help them apply the most promising research and best practices so that young people can grow and develop through powerful, sustained, and joyful experiences. So at this time, I would like to introduce Sandra Escamilla from YDI. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm really excited to be here today for many reasons, but especially because youth development is something that's very near and dear to me and has been since the beginning of my career 25 years ago. And now as the leader of the Youth Development Institute, it's very core to who we are because our mission is to promote positive youth development. And we do that in 3 distinct ways. The first one is by providing technical assistance to youth-serving organizations throughout the country. The second one is by documenting and disseminating promising practices, and many of those practices that have come from folks like you that have been doing the work on the ground. And then the final one is really by informing policy and supporting advocacy efforts that really make a difference in the lives of young people. And so I want to tell you a little bit about how we've come to this work and how we've arrived to working specifically with court-involved youth. So early on in 1991, we were founded really with the Beacons movement, right? And so how many people are familiar with Beacons, right? So they're 80 in New York City, and they're really kind of a hub of a lot of programs that are responsive to community needs. And so youth development at that time, now 25 years ago, in after-school settings, or in communities, was not that hard of a sell, right? People just needed to identify their practice. So folks were doing youth development, maybe they weren't calling it. So fast forward now to almost 10 years ago, we started to really see that we really needed to think about, if we were saying that youth development was for all young people, that we needed to go to places where maybe it wasn't as easy of a sell. And so we started to work with agencies that serve court-involved youth, foster care youth, and we realized that this framework that we're going to introduce a little later was a little more challenging and needed to be adapted, right? But that practitioners really got that it was a necessary ingredient to really enable young people who were system involved to really prepare and thrive. And so in some ways, in a recent conversation we were having with staff, we have a core training called the Advancing Youth Development Curriculum. And it really comes from the Office of Juvenile Justice, because 25 years ago when we started to do it, even they realized we needed more than just to fix young people to help prepare them. We really needed to think about a developmental approach. And so today I'm excited about kind of sharing the evolution of where we arrived to youth development. So we're going to talk a little bit about a framework that Sabrina Evans-Ellis, the Associate Executive Director, is going to present, where we culled all the research on youth development and distilled it to 3 elements that we really think is practitioner-friendly and program-friendly. Then we're going to invite you to take the framework and try to apply it to young people that are in your programs. And then finally, you're going to hear from some practitioners in the field about some of the strategies that they've used, some of the dilemmas that they've encountered in applying youth development. And then finally, we're going to also hear from young people about why youth development is important. So, but I wanted to start the day with, we're going to start the day with some opening remarks by a colleague and friend that has been very near and dear to us, the Commissioner of the Department of Probation, Ana Bermudez. And you can read her bio. I mean, it's amazing, and she's doing great work both in the Department of Probation, and she's done great work before that. But I want to kind of tell you a story about one time that I was in her office that really illustrates how much she gets youth development. So we were talking about kind of some of the work that she was beginning to do it, and just as kind of casual talk, she said, oh, you know, I started to think about that I wanted probation officers to begin to use their client's name in their reports rather than to use probationer. And I know that seems like something really subtle, but it was transformational. It is transformational because youth development is not about these big, enormous initiatives only. It's about the way that we intentionally change our practice and that enable us to shift mindsets. So all of a sudden that young person was Jackie or Esther or Mark or Alex and wasn't probationer. And as a practitioner, when you start to identify young people as people, you start to see them very differently. And Anna understands that, and she understands youth development both in very incremental ways, and she's also going to talk a little bit about some major initiatives that are not only just shifting the way the Department of Probation works with young people, but it's really shifting outcomes for young people. So I'm excited that she's here to really set the tone for today. Thank you.
I forgot about that story, and we did it. You know, we changed our reports to the courts as well as the case notes that people write. Instead of writing P for, probationer, people write the initial of the name of the young person or the young person's name. So anyway, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. As Sandra said herself, youth development principles are very dear to my heart and very important to the work that I do. And thanks also to the Pinkerton Foundation and John Jay for making this event happen, because it's critical that we are cross-pollinating all the time and not leave, our practices in our individual silos of either after school or, juvenile justice or, schools, etc. So it's a great opportunity. I also was very influenced by Sandra's predecessor, Peter Kleinbart, so I want to do a shout out to him too, as somebody who taught me quite a bit about this work. So I firmly believe that to be an agent of change in a young person's life, you must take a positive youth development approach. Or for young people who are court involved, the related positive youth justice approach. And it's perfect that we're here because Professor Butts is here too, and he was instrumental in my development in that regard as well. Because in applying youth development to the justice system, we had to narrow down a lot of stuff in terms of really concentrating on some of the competencies that the young people really need to succeed in life, right? So I believe that all of us in positions of authority over systems that impact young people must strive to align these systems with this approach and to follow these core principles. That we can hold young people accountable for their behavior and still make room for their voices in that accountability process. Young people can and will change their thinking and behavior if they're connected to the right people, given the right tools, and exposed to opportunities. It's not the opportunities or the services, it's the people that they connect with that can make those happen. Our job as the adults in the room and as the adults in positions of power is to send this message to our young people over and over again. We believe in you, we will not give up on you, and that's why we're trying to make you explain your actions so that you can find a new way forward. And we must be relentlessly and fiercely supportive. I mean it in the restorative sense. It actually means to explain your actions to someone else. Again, the relationship piece that is so critical, right? So when I talk about holding young people accountable, it's really a positive youth development in action, right? it builds life competencies of being able to think through what you do and think of other possibilities if what you did not work out in the best way possible, right? It also, because it means asking them to do something active, right? Answering to someone that is holding them, to their level of promise, right? To that supportive process of building that future. And so, as Deputy Commissioner for Juvenile Operations, when that story took place, and now as Commissioner, I constantly stress to my staff that they are agents of change in their clients' lives, and especially so with our adolescents and young adults. That if they can forge that transformative relationship with a young person based on trust, mutual respect, and transparency, they can help effect real and lasting change in those young people's lives. I say that because it is the right thing to do, right? It's what science about adolescent brain development tells us we should do. But it also has this significant benefit of empowering my staff, of embracing, when you embrace positive youth development, youth development approach, it makes our work so much more fulfilling, interesting, and meaningful, and lasting, frankly. Seeing young people as resilient, as autonomous, as vibrant, as filled with possibility instead of burdened by deficits, working with them through that lens is so much more inspiring, again, fulfilling, and dare I say, just. So I want to point out that this doesn't mean that we're going soft on young people, because that's the other thing. Oh, you do, youth development, you're coddling the offenders, right? And they have made some really bad choices oftentimes, and may have even hurt other people, right? So that cannot be ignored in all of this. So that goes back to the accountability piece. But also, it means that we want to make the young people work harder, right? That they really have to examine themselves and express themselves, to really look into themselves, which is really hard work for anyone, as we all very well know if we have ever tried to do that every year, for example, in our New Year's resolutions. And that we won't let them quit or fail, right? That this is as much about persistence and believing in yourself as anything else. I know from my work in community prep, which I'm so happy Maria Garcia is here, a fellow community prep alum. I was a high school for quote-involved youth, and probably the hardest work I've ever done. And also as a parent of teenagers, there's nothing that can drive a young person more crazy than an adult getting in their face and saying, I know you can do this. Tell me how we're going to do this differently. I'm not going to let you give up, right? But that is exactly what we need to do, and especially with those young people who may not have any other adults telling them that, whether at home or at school or other places. And the people who might be telling them that are not really good influences. So we've shaped a lot of our probation interventions using the youth development and positive youth justice model. We have an alternative to placement program called ECHOS, which is a joint life coaching model where the probation officer is essentially a life coach. So the first time I said to our juvenile probation officers that they should consider themselves youth workers, they looked at me like I was crazy. And maybe I am. But then slowly this has been evolving as a, more, what we've been talking about more is as agents of change, right? That need to balance this approach of holding people accountable and also the support. So in this program, ECHOS, the young people go through a cycle called Be Ready, where there's 3 stages of employability development. The idea is to have the young people develop the skills to become employable, not to give them a job necessarily, although they get stipends. And basically, if you screw up in that process, you don't get kicked out, you don't get a violation of probation, of course, under certain circumstances you might, but you just have to essentially start over again, over and over and over until you can make it through the 3 stages, right? So that's built into that program. We also have had any like employment program or stipend program that we have, we infuse it with positive youth development process. The days always start with a check-in, for the day, to review either what happened last night or in the weekend, or make sure that everybody's on the same page as to what we're going to do today, get people out. We end with a checkout, if something happens, if there's a conflict, any kind of conflict, because that's the other piece with young people, that they need to be able to identify what a conflict is beyond, like, if blows were not exchanged, it's not a conflict, right? So that's the whole piece. If something happens, that there's some discord among the group, work shuts down, everybody circles up, and then we go through what happened, what we need to to do to make sure this doesn't happen again, and we start the day over. Essentially, people make commitments to each other as to how they're going to behave and how they're going to repair any harm that was done by whatever conflict it was. And we've seen great results in all of this. The young people come, even when, in the ECHOS program, there's a Saturday component that starts at 10 o'clock, and the young people show up. In our youth wrap, which is our, when Hurricane Sandy came, it was a weekend weekend restoration program. Young people were coming Saturdays and Sundays, right? Over and over again. And it was really impressive how the connection, the probation officers staff both of these programs on the weekends also. So it gave a different type of relationship to the young people and their probation officers. And that was, we were able to really capitalize on that for their success. We also have group mentoring and individual mentoring programs that are also relationship based. It's about transformation, about looking at your life, about looking at your choices, and having the supports that you'll need to make better choices, right? So at DOP, we've been working on ways to help our young clients recognize that they can take control of their futures and that they can create a new now. But first, we, the adults in the room, we have to believe in them. We have to believe that they have that inner strength and that drive. And we have to operationalize that belief in the programs and services and supervision that we offer. So I will turn it over now to the rest of you to tell us how to put those principles into practice. And thank you for being here.
Good morning. My name is Sabrina Evans-Ellis. I'm the Associate Executive Director of the Youth Development Institute. Anna, thank you so much for kicking us off and letting us know about the work of the Department of Probation and about the art of young people creating the new now. That's going to stay with me for a while because they need support and they need encouragement to do so. So I just wanted to share with you that we are the Youth Development Institute. Our primary modality is usually training, so it was hard for us to resist opportunities for you to interact, and so we decided not to resist it. So this whole morning will be moments of presentation, but also moments when you get to reflect and talk at your tables and get to wrestle with some of the concepts that we're presenting here today. So what I'd love for you to just do, because you will be working with folks, is for you to just turn to the person to your left and to your right, and just introduce yourself, give them your name and your organization, and why you're here. Name, organization, and why you are here. Turn left, turn right. I'm going to stop you here. You will have more time to talk if someone just launched into something that you really want to hear more about. You'll come back to it in a moment. I just wanted to introduce the staff of the Youth Development Institute, who will be milling about throughout the day to help you at your tables and who will also be doing some of the presenting today. I'd like to introduce Maria Garcia, who is a program manager at the Youth Development Institute. I'd like to introduce Pardis Palmagoy, who's worked closely with our young adult initiatives. You've met Sandra. And I'd like to introduce Justine Beaton, who helped all of this happen. She is our guru operations person and keeps us all sane and keeps us from tripping all over ourselves most of the time. So what I'd love to do now is bring Sandra back up to share with you an activity that is typically done in our Advancing Youth Development training to give you a taste of how we start to shift mindsets when it comes to youth development. Sandra?
I so don't want to use this mic. I want to get into the, into kind of up close with you and start talking and making you move. But instead, I will follow instructions. I want you to think about, actually, I want, by getting up and staying up once I ask you this, I want you to stand if you are a mentor. I would like you to stand if you are a parent. And stay standing. You can just stay standing. I want you to stand if you are an older brother or an older sister. I'd like you to stand if you are a godparent, a caretaker, a grandparent. I'd like you to stand if you know a young person and a young person's in your life that you care about and love. I would like you to stand if you were once a young person. I got everyone, right? Some people were like, she's not called me yet. Okay, so now I invite you, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes and to think about that person that got you to stand. And I want you to think about everything that you love about that young person. I want you to think about everything that drives you crazy about that young person. I want you to think about all the things you hope for that young person, all the things that you want them to achieve while on this earth. And I want you to imagine that today was the first day of that young person's life and that you had an opportunity to tell him or her what you want for them. And once you've gathered your thoughts, I'd like you to turn to your folder and write that letter to that young person as if it were their first day. I'm going to pick 2 or 3 volunteers to say their letter. So take a moment and write that. And we actually have tissue boxes. This sometimes gets emotional. It's in the folder. Okay, who would like to volunteer? A smile and a nod is a selection process too. Anybody? And whoever goes first can actually pick the second person. How about that? Yes, sir. There's actually a mic right there if you can go to the mic and read your letter. You didn't know you signed up for that, right?
I actually wrote the letter to my son, Chris. And I happen to call him Little Chris, too. Welcome to the world. I hope that you grow up to be everything I was not and much more than what I have become. I want you to experience your full potential and to always remain grateful and humble. I want you to learn to appreciate the sacrifices that I have made for you and to do the same as you begin your own family. My greatest hope for you is that you leave a positive legacy behind in this life. I also want you to be the example to all those who follow behind you and to be a leader and not a follower.
Who would you like to go next? Is there anybody? Anybody? Anybody can raise their hand? This is how you make it. Thank you.
Command performance, sorry. All right, I wrote this to my nephew. I wrote, welcome to the world. Dear Noah, welcome to the world. I hope that you grow up to be happy and fulfilled. I want you to experience life in all its joy and sorrows, mostly joys. And always know that you can persevere. I know that you will learn to love and will also find your path in life. My greatest hope for you is that you be happy and fulfilled. I also want you to think of others and be generous with your time and soul. Love, Uncle James.
Nice. Anybody else? I'm feeling someone over here. Dina, since I know your name. No? Or anybody at that table? Dina? Okay, thank you.
This is to my nephew, Anthony. Dear little A, welcome to the world. I hope you grow up to be truly happy and well loved. I want you to experience mistakes and always know that they are normal and you will learn from them. I know you will learn to fear and doubt because that is natural, but I want you to use those fears and doubt to be the fuel to try new things and experience what scares you. My greatest hope for you is that you try. You love Yoda. Yoda said there is no try, there's only do, but I'm okay with you just giving it a shot. I also want you to respect all your strengths and try to improve your weaknesses. And I want you to be a natural leader that you already are. Love, Aunt Dee Dee.
Okay, one last one, just for good measure. Yes.
I wrote this to my niece, Moet. It says, welcome to the world. I hope that you grow up to be strong and independent. I want you to experience great opportunities and to always welcome them. I know that you will learn to handle and overcome all challenges and will also be great at whatever life throws your way. My greatest hope for you is that you always have strong, supportive people in your life to guide you in making good decisions. I also want you to be kind to people and to be humble.
Okay, so this is some of the things that I heard you all say about what you want for the young people in your life. You want them to experience greatness, to find their path, to have lots of opportunities, to give back, to be humble, to be strong, to be independent, to experience love, to be kind, to think of others, to respect themselves and others, to have everything, to have positive relationships, to use their fears to motivate them to do more and better, to be grateful, to be fulfilled, to be humble, to be an example, to have a positive legacy, to lead, to persevere, to improve their lives, to understand that mistakes are normal, to feel loved and to give love. What do people think about that? Impressive? Not impressive? Impressive, right? Is there anything that's missing that we'd like to add? Is there anything else that we want for young people in our lives? For the young people that you thought of or that you work with? What are our hopes? Anything else? Turn to the person next to you and tell them if there's one thing missing here that you would add. What would it be? So right to the person next to you. Is there something else that you would add to this? Okay, so what did you hear the person next to you say? Anything you would add? Passion. Okay, so we have passion. Passion, compassion, yes. Creativity. Anything else? Resilience. Discernment. Open-minded and intellectually curious. Anything else? Yes? Achievement. Empathetic. Acceptance for cultural differences. Yes? Sacrifice. Education. I mean, we could spend a whole afternoon, right, doing this. And I've got to tell you, I've been doing this for over 20 years. Maybe not 20, I'm exaggerating, but a lot of years. And in all that time, I have never heard anybody read a letter to say, "Dear little John, I hope that you do not become a drug addict. I hope that you do not have a baby early in life. I hope that you do not drop out of school." Nobody's ever said that. And if anybody knows the 80s, there were a lot of ads around like kind of young people being shown and saying nobody said that they ever wanted to grow up to be a truant or a drug addict, right? And yet all of the messages that we give to young people are about the things we don't want them to do. All programs are designed, or not all programs, a lot of programs are designed to avoid that. And funding streams often are also about that. So today we invite you to imagine, because that's what youth development is, imagine the outcomes that we have for young people that we really want, not just for the young people in our lives, but the young people that we work with directly, because that's going to set the vision that's going to move our practice in that way. So if we're only working around getting them out of something, either out of jail, out of not being arrested, or of not getting pregnant, then that's the beginning and the end of their journey, right? And yet what we know that all of these things, love, kindness, education, achievement, are critical to positive youth development. And that's what I want you to think about as Sabrina walks you through the framework. That the framework of positive youth development, the context of it is where we want young people to go. And if our vision of them is very limited, then we will only get up to the front door. And we are really imagining a world for young people. So with that said, I'd like to invite Sabrina, who's going to walk you through our framework, and that again is core to our training, and really begin to, we're going to send you some slides. Are we going to give them slides as well? Okay, so thank you.
Okay. Give us a second to get set up here. Can everyone hear me? Okay, good. In a short moment, we'll hand out the slide presentation so that you can follow along for some of the parts that will be easier read than seen on a screen. But for a moment, I just want to introduce how we're going to talk about this today. When we framed these two symposia, we first talked about the science of youth development and focusing on adolescent brain development, and then we wanted to focus on the art of youth development. And I'm a person who loves words. I love the meaning of words, so I had to look up the word art, which is hard to define, I'm sure, but there's always a definition somewhere. And the Oxford English Dictionary defines art as the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, producing works to be appreciated primarily for beauty or emotional power. Given that context, youth development is most certainly an art form concerned with the expression and application of the creativity and imagination of young people as they move towards adulthood. And the positive outcomes of that creativity and imagination are both beautiful and powerful, as you all indicated here. If we can move young people towards outcomes, we create beauty and power. So for a few minutes, I'd like to just share with you a little bit about the evolution of the field, and also share with you our framework and how we think about it, and what youth development is and what it is not, and how it works within programs. So, as Sandra said, for the first half of much of the 20th century, this should be on, here we go, need the green light. How many youth development trainers does it take to operate a PowerPoint? One. The traditional approach to working with young people in our country for most of the 20th century, we held a particular belief about young people. And it generally went like this. You wait until something happens, something bad. And then the system responds, and we intervene, and then we hope that the problem is fixed. And then we'll see a change in behavior, and we won't have to worry about it again. Youth in our country for a long time only warranted social attention when they were in a crisis. And a few decades of this approach yielded a particular prevention paradigm that Sandra just referenced earlier, where you have young people, your goal is to try to avoid all the social ills: drugs, alcohol, truancy, gangs, pregnancy, delinquency, and criminal activity. How many of you went to school in the 80s? Yes, I'm dating ourselves here. Anybody get dragged down to a Just Say No to Drugs assembly? Oh my God, they were awful. Took years off of your life and did nothing in the process. But that was the predominant paradigm. It was about prevention. It was about preventing all the bad things that we didn't want to see. Come on in, come on in. But researchers and people working with young people directly knew better. We knew that even if you got rid of drugs and tried to prevent gang activity and pregnancy and delinquency, we knew something that Karen Pittman, one of the foremothers of the youth development movement, always says this, that problem-free is not enough. Problem-free is not fully prepared. Fully prepared involves preparing young people for their transition to adulthood. And this can involve academic preparation, it can involve workforce preparation. And so in the 90s, we saw lots of employment programs, lots of college access programs, and strengths-based youth development programs. And I just want to remind us all that the Advancing Youth Development Curriculum, which is our signature curriculum, actually began in juvenile justice and juvenile delinquency prevention. OJJDP was looking for a different approach for working with young people that were system involved. And they wanted to do something that was strengths-based. And so they shifted its focus in part to what's now called youth development. So while we knew that preparation, making sure that young people graduated and had jobs, was part of the solution, we also knew that it still wasn't enough. As young people entered the 90s going headfirst against an economy that wasn't prepared to accommodate them, an educational system that was overwhelmed by inequity of needs and resources, and a criminal justice system that seemed poised to swallow entire generations. We needed more than just preparation in many ways. We needed engagement. We needed young people to contribute to the world and to learn more about themselves as they do so. And so, as we said earlier, the Youth Development Institute began to follow through and look through all of the research that has come about over the last 25 years and distilled it down to 3 elements. So if we just follow through Karen Pittman's full phrase now, it's problem-free is not fully prepared, and fully prepared is not fully engaged. And so that's what we are striving for, full preparation and full engagement. We're going to hand out the remainder of the presentation because it's easier followed this way, so just give them a moment. So here's what we know for sure about youth development. It doesn't just happen. You have to work at it, you've got to want it pretty badly, and you have to work for it continuously. So for the purposes of our discussion today, we will use this as our working definition for youth development. Youth development is an intentional effort, or intentional efforts, that promote positive outcomes for young people through a variety of supports, relationships, and opportunities. Positive youth development is designed to focus on the positive outcomes we desire for young people, not just the negative ones we hope to prevent. So the outcomes that you outlined in Dear Little are the kinds of outcomes that we should strive for with all young people. And that is the work of youth development. So here's how we've kind of come to our conclusions about it. Here's our 3 suggestions. The first element of youth development is connectedness. And this is rooted in a fairly essential and universal truth. Young people do everything through relationships. Everything. Any attempts to influence, advise, support, assist young people must first go through relationships. Has anyone ever tried to break up a fight between young people? Okay, yeah, it's like that. Have you ever tried to break up a fight with a young person that you know versus a young person that you don't know? What's the difference? You can just yell it out. What's the difference? Force. But receptivity, their willingness to hear you. If you can look a young person and you've got a relationship with them and you can say, Tyler, look at me. I need you to calm down. You can leverage that relationship to get to the behavior and to the outcome that you want, which is for the conflict to stop. So we know that relationships are essential. And we're going to talk in a little bit about how that works in practice. Our second elemental area is preparation. And this is rooted in the premise that all young people strive for mastery. They're hardwired that way. No young person comes into the world, I don't want to be good at anything. They want to be good at something. They want to accomplish something. They want to achieve something. For many young people, they get disconnected from that sense of mastery, but the search for, the drive for reconnecting to it is always there. A New York City official has shared with us that they were writing a proposal for a new initiative. This was at DYCD. They were writing a new initiative, and they convened some focus groups of young people, and they were asking them about the kinds of activities that they wanted them to have. And of course, basketball was on the table. And she said she'll never forget, a young man said, you know, basketball's cool, that's great, but truthfully, if you don't have a good coach who's going to help me up my game, I can stay on the field. I could just stay on the court with my friends. I don't need to come to your program for that. So if you're going to get a coach, could you please make it somebody that's going to elevate my game? And I think that's what most young people want. They want preparation that's going to help them elevate their game, that's going to help prepare them for adulthood. So when our young people are engaged in workforce programs and employment programs and academic programs, they want to be prepared in a way that will help make them better. And we'll talk a little bit again about how that will work in practice, but I just want you to know that the things that we want for young people, they want for themselves. Our third area, and perhaps what drives towards, what we're driving towards with the other two, is authentic participation. And this is rooted in the essential truth that young people discover who they are by having an impact on the world they live in. You know what you're capable of when you're able to teach others, lead others, and make decisions. I used to work for a time out in Brooklyn at Grand Street campus, and we used to run attendance prevention programs, and so we had all kinds of incentives, and one of our signature things was a big trip to Great Adventure. Yeah, that usually young people showed up in droves. But I'm sure many of you have had the experience of planning something for young people and they didn't show up. Okay, so I'm standing out in front of a bus that's paid for, with tickets that are paid for, and no young people. And rather than getting angry, I talked to them about it, and they were like, yeah, we kind of wanted to go to Great Adventure, but maybe not so much. So the next year, we changed the way we did this. And not only did we ask them where they wanted to go, we let them plan the trip. They got to call Great Adventure and get those group rates, and to call the bus company and get that group rate, and to figure out how to get all of the consent forms in, and how to do all of the items that went into doing it, the budgeting, making decisions about which menu we were going to order at Great Adventure. And a few things happened through this level of authentic participation. They learned skills that they couldn't learn otherwise. You don't learn about decision making by hearing about it, you learn about it by making decisions. You don't learn about budgeting by reading about it, you learn about budgeting by having to do it. And the most rewarding part of it was watching young people the day before walk through the hallways, pulling their friends and go, you better not miss my trip. I'll come get you. There was a threat in there, but hearing them refer to it as my trip, knowing I did this, I created this opportunity for my friends, and I want them to benefit from it, is really the heart of authentic participation. So how does this work in practice? I can tell you, if we do all of this, we will get to thriving youth. And by thriving youth, we mean young people that are growing and flourishing and who can press on despite difficulties in their lives. So very quickly, in practice, what does this look like? It means that we place relationship building at the center of our systems, our structures, and our staff behavior. It means we allow time for it. Very often you hear staff saying, my caseload's too heavy. That gets in the way of youth development, so that's something we have to keep in mind. You create environments that promote connectedness. And you never forget and never underestimate that connection is critical. For preparation, remembering that all young people strive for mastery. This is about more than a credential. Young people need and want personal, academic, and professional mastery. So it's not just about the so-called hard skills or the sector-based skills that we're all encouraged to go for. It's about the other hard skills. I have trouble calling it soft skills because I don't think there's anything soft about a young person learning how to manage their emotions. I don't think there's anything soft about them learning conflict resolution or about how to problem solve. So it's about learning those other hard skills. It's also about assisting young people, supporting them, and being flexible, and knowing that, as we said earlier, all young people are wired for mastery. But if you've become disconnected from that sense of mastery and that drive towards mastery, you need a minute to reconnect to it. You need a minute to really think, I can do things, I'm interested in doing things. So, as we said earlier, what we want for young people should be what they want for themselves, but we've got to do that with them together. So those goals that they outline, their reasons for participating in our programs, should be co-constructed, not something that we dictate to them and place on them, but something that we work on together. And finally, authentic participation. What does that mean in practice? It means involving youth in program decision-making and implementation, and this has tremendous implications for adults, because authentic participation requires that as adults, we know when to step up and we know when to back off. We know when to allow young people space and to trust them, and sometimes to allow them to make mistakes. Authentic participation involves giving young people opportunities to define and lead their experiences, take risks, and deepen their self-awareness. And the best place to start is within our own programs, involving young people in hiring, involving young people in the direction of your programs, how the money is spent. Sometimes we do an activity in our training where we ask staff, can young people be involved in hiring? And people kind of give us the side eye like, I'm not sure about that. But if a young person is going to be sitting in front of a group facilitator for the next 3 months, who better to provide some insights about the skills of that facilitator than a young person? So there are ways to do that, and if you catch us during the break, we'll talk to you about it. And arrange authentic access to decision making. Moving young people beyond a moment of, what do you think, to really giving them a seat at the table, where they are involved in decisions from the onset, where they can help shape and influence the program, where they get to evaluate the program and tell you why something worked and why something didn't work, is the way to get them involved. Okay. So, very often, when we tell people that youth development is about connectedness, it's about preparation, it's about authentic participation, people start to ask us, so does that mean I need to find a curriculum about connectedness? Does that mean that I need to hire a participation person? Or does it mean that we need a program or a department that's organized around preparation? Not exactly, because youth development is not a program, it's not a person, it's not a curriculum, it's an approach. And so this is the best way that I had to explain this to a group of doctors one day, and it was a helpful way to think about it. So this is your "Are you smarter than a fifth grader" moment. Who recalls what a pulley does? A pulley. What does it do? It moves objects. And she's doing a little full job. It moves objects. Absolutely. Positive youth outcomes can be a heavy lift. Getting a young person to obtain an HSE after years of academic failure can be hard. Young people who have grown to distrust can find connectedness very difficult. And all of these outcomes can be difficult to achieve. But when you add youth development principles to your efforts, to the way you train your staff, to the curricula that you bring, you increase the likelihood that you will be able to lift that load. So in this instance, positive youth development is almost like a pulley. It's not the program itself. It enables your program to function and work better. It enables your program to reach young people in a meaningful way, simply by making sure that everything is filtered through connectedness, preparation, and authentic participation, and making sure that your staff are prepared to do that. And the final way that we'd like for you to think about how youth development works has to do with whether or not there's organizational alignment within your program. With any program, there are results. Everyone's driving towards results. We all have to report out on them. But there are two pathways to results. There's a strategic pathway. That's usually comprised of your mission, your goals, your objectives, your activities. These are the things that you have to do. It's the what. But there's a secondary path to your results that's about your culture, your vision, your values, the practices that operationalize those values, and how it shows up and how staff interact with young people on a daily basis. Whoops, I keep pressing that black one, I'm sorry. That is the how. So when you think about youth development, it's a combination of taking connectedness, authentic participation, and preparation, applying it and infusing it throughout your program at multiple levels, and ensuring that your strategies are aligned with your culture. Very often we've seen people manipulate the strategy side. They have strategic plans, they change their activities. If young people aren't showing up, they change the activity. It may not be the activity. It may be the culture. It may be the ways in which young people feel welcome. It may be the ways in which young people feel believed in. So you may need to attend to the cultural side of it. And that's what we do at the Youth Development Institute. And that's what we're going to invite you to do this morning as we begin to look at how this works in our programs. So I've given you a lot of information. And I just want you to take a moment and talk at your tables about what initial thoughts you have about what we've said in this framework. What are some of your initial thoughts? So let's just come back together and just popcorn out a few responses. You'll have to be patient with us because it's a large room in order for everyone to be heard, especially when we really want to capture what you've said and what you're thinking. We do have to ask you to use the microphones. But what are some of the things that popped up for you at your tables about your initial thoughts or reactions? I heard some things about it's familiar, this is the way we do our work. What are some things that you all said? Should we bring the microphones? Yeah, maybe we can bring the microphones around. It's going to make our cameraman nuts, I'm sorry. We're just going to have to turn this for a second into Oprah. No one? Anyone? Thank you. All the way on the other room. You know, make her run.
Thank you.
Sure.
One of the things that was mentioned at our table here is different ways for allowing young people to naturally become a part of the process. The work was a more organic way, instead of from a top-down way to where things are already sort of thought out, to sort of bring them more in from the beginning and as active participants.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Other thoughts? We just want to make sure that it's landing, because we're going to be working within this framework for the remainder of the morning, and so if people have questions or thoughts. Yeah.
Sure. Hey, Edgar Torres from Bronx Connect.
Hey.
I think that one of the things that our group here, that one of the things we agreed on was just seeing the value of connectedness and seeing that they making sure the youth know that they're valued, because if they're not valued, they will know as well. And even with our program, who works with court-involved youth, sometimes we've learned that sometimes they just really want to be someone to just spend time with them.
Absolutely.
It's because a lot of the feedback that they get is negative. So even just to be able to be who they are and acknowledge them that way is just so powerful for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone else? This side of the room. Again.
One of the things that came to me was that the budget, that they should know about the budget and it should be transparent, where they see where the money that was put aside for their program, what it actually does. And even maybe even salaries. I'm not saying they should know everybody's salary, but they should know how much money goes to salary. And it's something for them to aim for. You know, maybe I'll become this. Maybe I, you know. So I think that's important.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad, just to be clear, there kind of isn't a right way or a wrong way to have young people authentically engaged and participating in your programs. The point is to just keep pushing it. So if you've got a $50,000 budget and $30,000 of it is salary and $20,000 of it is the activities that they do, they can be involved in discussions about the 20. That's how they can learn about it. So thank you for just bringing that point up, because very often when we mention budgets, people get a little antsy about, you know, confidentiality laws and so forth. Anything else? Yeah, thanks.
Chris Claudio, SES. We were talking about how just the investment in the process. You know, you have mentioned about, you know, if they're going on a trip, and I know that with us in juvenile justice, it's really difficult, and sometimes we have that captive audience that this is what they're going to do, this is what they have to do, but sometimes you get some kids that just turn it up, they feel like rebelling, and if they were more invested in that process, I think it would be a much different outcome as a result.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If it's my trip, I'm not going to mess up my trip. I might mess up your trip. But my trip, no. We're going to have a good time. Okay. Thank you, Pardis. So for the remainder of the morning, we're going to take a short break in a moment. And when we come back, we're going to wrestle with these concepts a little bit more about how it specifically lands with the young people that we know and work with on a daily basis. And then we'll also hear a little bit more from some practitioners who have really wrestled with how to get this working within an organization, and what's strategy and what's culture and how do we put it all together. But I just want to close by thanking you for your time to share this with you, and to just remember that this is an art form. With all of its colors and all of its messiness. We were joking when we were talking about this as an art form about Jackson Pollock as an artist, and he just kind of threw things up against the wall, but eventually it became art. And so we invite you to kind of deal with youth development and its messiness and its loudness and its difficulties, but also its beauty and its challenges and its opportunities and its rewards, because you just can't go wrong. So we invite you to take a break. It is 10:18. 10:30? Is that enough time? Okay, everyone can come back at 10:30.